Hi there, I'm Zach Braff.
And I'm Donald Faison.
We're real-life best friends, but we met playing fake-life best friends, Turk and JD, on the sitcom Scrubs.
20 years later, we've decided to rewatch the series one episode at a time and put our memories into a podcast you can listen to at home.
We're going to get all our special guest friends like Sarah Chalk, John C. McGinley, Neil Flynn, Judy Reyes.
Show creator Bill Lawrence, editors, writers, and even prop masters will tell us about what inspired the series and how we became a family.
You can listen to the podcast Fake Doctors, Real Friends with Zach and Donald on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts.
What's up, everybody? How are you doing? I am Ray Harkins. You're listening to 100 Words or Less, the podcast, as you always are, every Wednesday, just like clockwork, you know? At least I try to make it. So that way you know that you have something to look forward to in the week. I mean, I know I look forward to publishing these episodes, so, you know, I hope that you look forward to it as well. This week is an awesome one with Anthony Anzaldo from Ceremony. I've known him for a little bit, like, you know, we just met each other at shows and stuff, and their new record is unbelievable. It came out on Relapse a couple of weeks ago, Into the Spirit World, and it's really good. Ceremony continues to reinvent themselves, but still be the same band. Like, we actually, Anthony and I, dig into that a lot in this conversation because, you know, the common narrative of this band is like, oh my gosh, every record is so different. Like, remember when they were a power violence band? Now they're like some weird post-punk thing. It's like, you know what? The core of them still exists. And it's so cool to see them be able to, exist in this world of ever-changing music preferences. And yeah, I just love the band so much. And Anthony was gracious enough to, hang out with me on a drive that he was doing up in Northern California after they played some record release shows recently. So, more on him in a few moments, but how are you? Okay, like, I find myself vacillating week to week on emotions and feeling good and solid and safe, and then some weeks I feel like just an emotional wreck. So, frankly, this past week, I felt like that. I felt like I was just, started a new job, and feeling a lot of stresses from that and feeling like, oh my gosh, did I make the right decision? Like, I don't know, in long term, just all of these thoughts ping-ponging around in my head and consuming a lot of my mental headspace. And so I'm trying to figure out how to be able to kind of, you know, manage that side of anxiety and stress and fear and all that stuff and just tell it to go away. I know it's easier said than done. And I know I'm not successful at it. I struggle with it constantly because, I feel like when one area of your life kind of gets a little out of whack, your others are affected. I'm sure you experience this all the time. And so, I don't know, I would love to hear from you, the listener, 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. You know, what strategies do you use? What techniques do you use to be able to, not even compartmentalize, but to be able to like calm those voices, you know? I know myself that I definitely lean very much into my faith, very much into like my, sort of quiet meditation moments, and being able to, share those moments with, family and friends, and basically just feel vulnerable, feel like I am ready to, express what I am feeling. And even though I might not be incredibly articulate in the way that I'm expressing my feelings to them, that they are still there for me and emotionally there for me, and trying to not even so much like offer up, solutions or suggestions, but to be able to just, be there with me. And that's incredibly meaningful. Like, as I'm talking about this right now, I'm kind of getting choked up because we're all in this weird journey called life together. And we all have certain coping mechanisms, and we all have these things that we're just terrified of and scared of, whether it's death, whether it's like, will I have a job next year? Will I be able to pay rent this month? These are all real emotions. And each one of us are going through a different journey on that. And I want to encourage you to feel like you are not alone in this. Like, that is what gives me, I wouldn't even call it faith, but that gives me the sort of emotional resonance that even though I may be just like punishing myself immensely, that there are people that are doing that as well. And that helps me calm that dumb inner voice that we all have, where it's just like, we're going through 5 billion different scenarios, try to play them all out in our heads so that we get some sort of weird control. None of us have control. We have no clue what happens on a day-to-day basis. And that is terrifying, but it's also heartening in the fact that we're all doing this together, you know? So anyways, I know it's a very sort of heavy emotional output, but it's what's been on my mind, you know? And I just want you to know that I am here for you in whatever capacity I can be from that perspective. And in turn, I hope I can lean on you. Okay? Like I will be asking you of that at some point. I mean, you listen to this show on a weekly basis, so hopefully we forged some sort of relationship. And even though I may not know you, I probably do know you in some capacity, if that makes sense. So anyways, had to get it off my chest. But here is the great discussion with Anthony. He's a guitarist of Ceremony, is a just an incredibly compelling dude. And I found out that we were both born in Las Vegas, Nevada, which is weird because most people aren't born in Vegas. So anyways, here's the chat with Anthony, and I will talk to you, of course, after the episode is over.
And I want to say, I mean, I was aware of the band prior to this, but you guys were forever cemented in my brain when I think it was either 2006 or 2007 Sound and Fury, where you did the Dead Kennedys cover, the California Uber Alice. Was that 2006? Maybe I can't remember. I'm losing my thought.
We likely covered it at both 06 and 07, but.
Okay.
07 is the year that that people. Oh, I'm sorry. 07 is the set rather that people will still reference and talk about, and
right.
That's you're likely talking about 07. Yeah, we started off the set with the Crass intro.
Yes, there we go. Yep. Yeah.
I had beautiful long platinum hair.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, and just, following you guys since then and, obviously like booking you at Sound and Fury and just, kind of getting to know you guys sort of casually over time, it's really weird because, I don't think there are very many bands that feel like every time that you guys play a particular fest, Sound and Fury being the one, where it's like, it's always this like coming out party, whether it's like, whether it's like, you guys are playing new songs or whether it's like, you're just obviously in a different stage of the band, but at the same time, like you have no problem playing songs from the entire, catalog or whatever. Does that, I understand it's a kind of a big question, but just like, do you guys kind of view those experiences as such, where it's just like, okay, like we want to do something, kind of different and special for this particular fest. It doesn't even have to be Sound and Fury, but just, I don't know, that is a really real thing that I've noticed. And I'm sure you guys noticed too.
Yeah. When, I think it's important for any performer in any avenue of performing arts to take advantage when there are more eyes on you. I feel, when we definitely put more time into a set list than for a record release show than we would for just any show on tour. We just had our record release shows for our new album In the Spirit World this last weekend. And we worked really hard to have the set, not only be seamless, but to feature the new songs a certain way, have them go into which old song, would they go well into, how to incorporate the poems on the new album, try different, more instrumentation. So, I've always been very conscious to, play to the room accordingly. If you're playing a basement show, the set is should be a certain way. If you're headlining a Sound and Fury, and likely everyone there has seen you at least, the majority of the crowd has seen you at least once, maybe even more, and there's a lot of people there, it's important to do something different and special.
Totally. Yeah, it's very, I mean, especially too, like once a lot of the times, and I'm sure, because you guys were obviously a younger band when you were playing Sound and Fury in those years, you in certain respects, you also want to stand out from the rest of the bands by doing, like if you did a Minor Threat cover, like, there's been 400 of those done at Sound and Fury, but you guys are like, no, let's do something a little bit different.
Right. Exactly. And I think we've always just had, a knack for that sounds a little too, egomaniacal, but we've always just been attracted to that, the element of performing and creating that does stand out and is different than other things that are in our lane, or that, is different from what's going on around us. Yeah.
Well, and plus too, it's like, people would like to think that, they are like born into, whatever music they are listening to at that particular moment. But it's just like, well, right. Like, no, like you built off of all of these bands that you were into, and not saying that Dead Kennedys was never like, not cool. 'Cause of course it's like a foundational band for punk, but like, people may have not listened to them in, 5 to 6 years. And then all of a sudden you guys do that cover and you're just like, oh, that's right. I really do like Dead Kennedys or whatever,
Right. Right. 'Cause they're not, Sound and Fury is a very, is very much a hardcore, at least then very much a hardcore festival. And of course, hardcore is born out of punk, obviously, but a song like California Uber Alice is far more a punk song, or early, doesn't, or an early hardcore song. It doesn't necessarily line up with a modern hardcore sound. So even doing, obviously, like you said, Dead Kennedys are a seminal band, and California Uber Alice, is a song that most people know. That being said, it's not, it doesn't sound like what hardcore sounded like in 2007.
Yeah, no, totally. And you kind of putting the focus on you. Were you born and raised in California? Because I, just like simple biographical information, I really couldn't find out that much about you. So we get to do the
that's great.
Connect it. Yeah, you're like, that's what I intended.
Beautiful. I was born in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Shut up, dude.
My father,
Anthony.
Yeah.
Can I please interrupt you, because I was born in Las Vegas,
please.
And I have never.
Wow.
I very rarely meet people who are like born in Vegas.
Yeah, Sunrise Hospital,
dude. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's hilarious, man. Yeah. Okay. So
yeah.
So how many years did you live there?
I lived there for the first 5 years of my life. My father was a top 40 radio DJ. And program director in Las Vegas.
Okay.
And then we moved to Detroit, Michigan for a year, where we moved to my dad's work. He left radio and got into record promotion. He worked for he was what was called a radio rep for then Elektra Records. And then we moved to a suburb of Philadelphia called, in Mount Laurel, New Jersey.
Okay.
We lived there for a year. And then in the summer of 1994, we moved to Rohnert Park, California. I was 8 years old and started second grade there. And lived in Northern California until 2 years ago.
Got it. Okay. That's I appreciate the context and the movie. The moving around is definitely indicative, obviously, of your dad's gig and trying to, land at the appropriate spot and stuff like that.
Did very common for
that industry.
For radio folk and for, record industry. especially for promotion, for record promotion in the 90s, for people to move around a lot.
For sure. And did you, like being kind of, moved around? I mean, granted you were young, so I'm sure you only have like really fleeting memories of these places. Did you feel like you always had to kind of like, be that chameleon to, fit in with this new group of kids and try to find, new friends and that sort of stuff? Or, was that just kind of,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. There was no other way about it. I remember we were really into wrestling, me and my brother, when we were kids. I mean, I still love wrestling, but we were really, that was a big passion of ours when we were young children. And I remember there was this kid in our neighborhood that we met only a couple days before we moved out of Mount Laurel to California. And he had just the sickest wrestling toy collection and was really deep into it. And I still vividly remember as an 8-year-old kid saying out loud, "Man, I wish we became friends a year ago, because it would have been rad to have someone in our neighborhood with similar interests and another friend." But we moved, so rapidly that it was, it was really hard to, maintain relationships with people. And I know that sounds, a little dramatic, being, for a 6-year-old kid. I wasn't thinking of it as maintaining a relationship, but the reality is, we only had so much time in these places. And I think that's pretty common, obviously for children who have parents, in the military. I think that's a pretty common thing where you don't really have a lot of close friends until you plant roots in a foundation somewhere, which I didn't do until moving to Rohnert Park.
Sure. And so, as you started to, go to elementary school and start to get settled in California, you mentioned you have a brother. Is he older or younger than you?
He's a year older.
Okay. Got it. Oh, that's pretty quick. Your parents didn't waste any time there.
Yeah. And I have a sister who's me, my brother, and my first youngest sister are all within a year and a half. So,
wow. They had
so the three of us were in high school together at one point.
Was that, because that's not, it's common to have siblings, in the same high school and stuff like that, but you guys were all like literally like a grade apart. Was that weird at all? Or was it just like, oh, okay, that's fine?
I never knew anything different, by the time I was 8 years old, I was one of 5, so most of my life I've had a lot of siblings, and it was always really normal, to just have a lot of us around. And I was always in school with another one of my siblings, no matter which stage of my life I was in.
Sure.
So it was always that way.
Yeah. And so did you, I guess, like school care, what kind of kid were you? Did you, dabble in sports? Were you like a science kid? You like math? Like, where'd you find yourself?
I was into sports until, towards the end of my time in middle school. Once I got into high school, and sports was not on my radar and not something I was interested at all. And I got into punk, and that classic tale of finding punk and really realizing sports were lame.
Right. Right.
But as a young child, I played sports year round. I played baseball, basketball, and football. And then I would during basketball season I wrestled also. So I played sports year round from second grade to 7th grade. But it's funny. I don't know. I think looking back, I think it must have just been for the social element, because there was never one day where I had sports practice where I wasn't bummed. It always felt like a chore. Sports never felt fun to me. it just felt like something to do to hang out with my friends, really.
Right.
And, like doing well was fun and felt good, but I knew I wasn't meant to play sports when, if I didn't do well in the game or in the meet, but my team won, I was upset. I would much rather myself do well and my team lose than my team win and me do bad.
Right.
And I think, and I remember realizing that towards probably in 6th grade and thinking, I don't think this is for me. But I was always really into music. My family was in the music business, and we started going to concerts when I was 6 years old. I went to Meatloaf Bat Out of Hell tour in 1993. Me, my mom, my dad, and my older brother. And then from then, going to shows was a regular part of my life.
Sure.
From then until now. So that's really what me and my brother are so close in age, and we shared a room. That was the biggest interest of ours. Was we were going to record stores when we were in elementary school, picking up things that we didn't have, and luckily, my dad, because again, being in the industry, if it was on a major label, we could ask him, because he knew. It's like any industry, he knew all of the reps from all the other labels. So if the new Jodeci record or the new, Antichrist Superstar, or there's a lot of records that we just be like, Dad, this record's coming out next week. Can you get it for us? And he would be able to do so. So
Yeah,
our CD collection as kids was, in the thousands.
Yeah, no, that is really, it's cool too, because obviously with that access to the music, you could sample, because, when you're a kid, you don't pay attention to, scenes, or you're just listening to music because you like it and it's good. And to have that, that access to literally everything, like you said, whatever, mentioning Marilyn Manson and Jodeci in the same sentence, it's I think that is what kids, just would love to be exposed to, where it's just show it all to me, and then I'll figure out what I like. And so having that,
exactly,
not even knowing you that well and meeting you just in passing, hearing that sort of origin story of you, I'm like, oh yeah, I see why Anthony is the way that he is. Just in the way that you express yourself musically, I'm just like, oh yeah, you throw everything in a blender and then you figure it out.
Sure. Yeah. And I guess, I never really put things in such a tangible way like that, but you're right. We would go into our family record collection in our living room, and you would find things that you have heard of, and see and you would check it, and we would check it out for ourselves, or you would just find things because, you would throw something on because the cover looked cool. That's how you got, or me, that's how I got into a lot of records. When you're under the age of 10, you have no, like you said, you have no concept of scenes or really even genres apart from, that there's pop, that there's rap, and that there's rock. That's really it,
Yep.
And so having no grasp on any scene or genre, you just go with what looks cool, and if that record inspires you or makes you feel anything in any way, then you get their other records. But I remember getting into Prince, just going to our CD collection and going and asking my dad, hey, I've heard about this artist Prince, which record should I start with? And he said Purple Rain, and we went to, and so I go to our family collection, and I remember we only had the 3-disc greatest hits in 1999. And I was like, well, Dad, we don't have a record called Purple Rain. And he was so mind blown that we didn't own Purple Rain because it was such a, not only a seminal record for Prince, but just for pop culture and for music in general. And him being, you know, a pop DJ in the 80s, somehow it just must have gotten lost, or who knows why we didn't have it in the house. But he took me to Backdoor Disc and Tape in Cotati, California, and we bought Purple Rain for me right there on the spot. And then I had 1999 and Purple Rain and the Greatest Hits, loved all of it. So for that year, for Christmas, I asked for every Prince CD.
Nice.
That had been released up until that point. So until then it was, so I got every Prince record, from For You and from 78 to the Emancipation triple disc, in 96. So that was, I mean, that's how I got into Prince, but that sort of thing was very common in mine and my brother's life. And, you know, obviously it's a great privilege to have that access to so much music, as a youth, you know, but that was just normal, everyday life.
Support for today's show comes from Sonos, the best speaker system I have ever owned, heard, witnessed in my entire life. They do such a good job of making it extremely, extremely easy for you to open the box, plug it in, get it set up and running within like 5 minutes. And you can outfit your entire house like I have. Like my son's room has some speakers. Our living room has speakers, and I'm connecting our new Sonos bar to our TV very soon, and I could not be more excited about that. So my son, he listens to Bon Iver every night as he goes to sleep. Like, tell me how much you like the Sonos, Raymond.
I love it so much.
So he loves it so much, and I can put a sleep timer on it so it plays for 15 minutes as he goes to sleep, and then boom, he's done, and he's out for the night. It's great. And also, we can be listening to different music downstairs while he is listening to Bon Iver on his speaker in his room. It's such a cool thing. So please go to Sonos.com and you can learn about their entire product line, because they have incredible speakers for any shape or size of room and house that you have. You know, you can outfit your apartment from top to bottom with this stuff, and you will listen to music differently. So like I said, go to Sonos.com. I love them so, so much. And so does my son.
Yeah.
Sonos, thank you very much. And please listen to music differently. Get yourself on Sonos, okay? Now, here's the rest of the show.
This is, you know, me kind of playing armchair psychiatrist, but like you've always struck me as a person that is, you know, confident in kind of who they are, comfortable in your skin, to obviously be able to experiment with the, you know, variety of different styles that you had, just, you know, I mean, from your fashion sense on stage and that sort of stuff. Had that sort of, because obviously it takes a certain level of just like, well, yeah, I'm going to do this. I don't care what people think of me. Right. You know, had that confidence kind of like always sort of like been there, or was that something you kind of like grew into once you know, felt more comfortable expressing yourself in those ways, or, you know, how did that kind of manifest itself?
I think it started with getting into Prince. I was Prince for Halloween in the 3rd grade, and I remember wearing my mom's clothes, like finding clothes of hers that I could pull off, and that was sort of in the vein of something Prince would wear, and doing my makeup like Prince, and that was my first memory of, you know, going out in public, and wearing, you know, women's clothing.
Mm-hmm.
But I was always any chance to wear pleather or go to an event as a kid where I could wear makeup or face paint. That's always what I wanted that's always how I wanted to present myself. And I think it started with Prince, but then when I got into punk, it was, you know, getting into, you know, Iggy Pop and Robert Smith, and even, and then all of, you know, the Batcave death rock stuff, and even, you know, early Mike Ness, you know, that all very much influenced my personal aesthetic.
Yeah.
From there forward.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah. Cause it is once you start to see, all of the ways that you can experiment with, your looks and what you can do. And then, you just like, oh yeah, like that's cool. Like I want to try that out. I want to try black under my eyes, or I want to try black nail polish and like that sort of stuff, where it's just like, yeah, just try it and see how you feel about it.
Right. Exactly.
And so, as you started to, like dive deeper, into music, and like you said, sports kind of started to fade to the background when you were in high school, and, punk started to really, really kind of consume you. I imagine your experience is very similar to a lot of other people's, where it's like, you just start going to, a ton of shows and getting exposed to all of this sort of stuff. Did you kind of immediately take to the idea of like, yes, I want to be in a band. I need to figure out how to do that?
Yeah, I started playing guitar before I got into punk. So I was trying to play with people before, my 8th grade year, I got a guitar, and my friend group started to shift from people who I, went to elementary school with, or just classmates, or people who I played on teams with, to people who played music. So by the time I got into punk, I'd been playing guitar for a few years. And the great thing about punk is that, your abilities as a musician is secondary. It's really just about you. Like, you start the band and you're in a band, and you'll figure out how to play later. So there were so many people in punk that were interested in playing music, so that it was sort of reversed for me. I gravitated towards punk because so many people in the punk scene wanted to play music, as opposed to getting into punk and then wanting to start a band.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that I like. So, I really like that different part. Yeah, I like that differentiation, because it is like you were looking for people to play with, and so then the people that you found were interested in punk and playing that. So you're just like, okay, well, I'm going to lean into this, as opposed to so many people where it's like, they get into Descendants or Minor Threat, and they're just like, oh yeah, like I'm going to try to figure out, I could probably play guitar, but you were already there and just waiting. Right. It's like your life could have gone so differently if it was someone else, where it's just like, oh yeah, like, I'm playing this 80s pop. You're like, okay, that's fine. I know how to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And, I was playing in bands before punk bands, just local, just rock bands, but I started to lean more into punk, A, because of straight edge, and B, the community that surrounded it was a very positive thing in my life, and there wasn't, if you're 16 years old, I was playing music. I was a freshman, and I was in bands with people who had just graduated high school. And the stuff that we were playing, there weren't other bands to do weekends with. There wasn't a scene around it. You just wrote music in your practice space and hope that you can get on shows and cross your fingers, where obviously, I don't need to explain this to anyone who's listening to this podcast right now, but there was, the communal aspect of punk, was something I was very drawn to.
Sure.
And had a very positive, impact on my life.
Mm-hmm.
And that drove, that really allowed me to sort of walk away from the kind of stuff I was playing, and the kind of, to starting punk bands and hardcore bands.
Sure. I'm gonna take a stab in the dark. I presume with all the bands that you were playing in prior to Ceremony, like, did you do any touring or anything like that? Or was that primarily, like, Ceremony was your first experience of tour?
Ceremony was not my first experience with touring. I filled in for a band called These Days, who was a hardcore band, JD, who plays bass in Ceremony, and Alex Capasso, who was Ceremony's original second guitar player. It was their band I was filling in for. And then there's a band from our town called Lifelong Tragedy, who I filled in on tour with. So I had done 2 tours before, when I was in high school, before Ceremony started playing outside of California. But both hardcore bands, and both like in the same scene and same members as Ceremony.
Sure. Yeah. The usual first experience of, obviously sleeping on floors and going to Del Taco after the show and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Wendy's baked potatoes, no butter.
Of course. Classic.
Yeah.
So did you, did you like the touring experience, like as you started to experience it?
Oh my God. It was the greatest. It was the greatest thing ever. I told this story on a podcast a couple days ago with Jamie and Abraham from Fucked Up, turned out a punk. So I won't bore the listener with it too much. But the first show I ever played out of town was in Minneapolis, and there was no shows in between California and Minneapolis. So it took us 2 days to get there, and there were 0 people paid at the show. And that was one of the greatest days of my entire life.
Right.
Just playing in another time zone.
Yep. Totally.
Was even though there was no one there, it was in a real, a place with walls, and we were playing our music. As a junior in high school, it was really hard for me to wrap my head around that. And, it was so, even then I felt so privileged to be able to, play music outside of my hometown. And, it was just an unreal experience.
Sure.
Yeah. I love touring, from the start. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's cool, because that idea is so special. Just it doesn't matter if no one shows up. It just the idea of being like, the music that I've created with my friends like took me here, and that is so crazy to think about. Where it's like, whatever.
Right.
You go back to high school and your friends like, oh, what did you do over the weekend? It's like, oh yeah, or summer vacation. You're like, oh yeah, I went to like Minneapolis and played in front of -4 people, and it's like, and it was the best. Everyone's like, oh. I just went to the beach, and you're like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, exactly. Like I knew that what we were doing was not normal for someone my age, and it was never lost on me the significance that experience was having on me.
Yeah. No, that's super cool. And so, kind of as you were matriculating through school, like, was there a life path that was kind of, set out for you as far as like, oh yeah, like maybe I'll, be a doctor or lawyer or anything that?
No.
Yeah. It was.
I always just wanted to play music.
Got it.
Yeah. That's the only, I never considered going to Santa Rosa Junior College, or any of the things that were sort of standard in our town. And and there are people in Ceremony who have done amazing things in school. Our bass player Justin is getting his PhD in pure mathematics, and Ross just did an MFA program for poetry at the University of Syracuse. And you can do both, and you can have more than one interest, but I guess what I'm trying to say is this was never just an interest for me. This was
the thing.
Always clear of what it was clear that this is what I wanted to do, and to work as hard as I can to play music as much as I possibly can.
Sure. And so I'm not going to go blow by blow through, the formation of Ceremony and stuff like that, because obviously that's been covered in many different places. But, as people started to pay attention to what Ceremony was doing, and things started to, like you guys were able to put tours together and, put out records and all that sort of stuff. when did it for you kind of feel like this was something, and I use the air quotes around this word, like real, where it's just like, holy crap.
Sure.
It doesn't even have to be like obviously a big show or this like, moment, where the clouds part and all of a sudden, you've been bestowed the idea of, playing in a full-time band or whatever. When did you personally feel like, oh my gosh, like, wow, this is like nothing I ever would have anticipated happening?
We were very fortunate from the inception of the band to have had people pay attention to us. We had sold our demos on the Lifelong Tragedy at the Lifelong Tragedy merch table for a few months before we started playing shows. So there were so our friends and sort of peripheral friends knew the words to our songs at our first show, and that is something that none of us ever experienced before. In any of the other bands that we had played in. And then we got offered to play Positive Numbers Fest just a few months after playing. And that was a big, we fucking made it. We made it.
Right.
But I do have this vivid memory of playing Gilman one time because our friends from North Bay, rolled hard for ceremony shows in the first couple years. And I remember playing Gilman, I think it was us, Internal Affairs, and Lights Out. And I remember our set being so killer. It was super fun. All the things happened, people singing along. And I remember not recognizing one person singing along to our band. And none of our friends were there. And I was like, oh my God, this may be a real thing. We would, outside of our town and our, little scene. Because still at Positive Numbers, it was an honor to play at such an early stage of the band, but no one knew us at that show. We didn't, it's not like that we killed it by any means. But I feel like I remember the first time we had a good reaction. That was not a result of us getting all of our friends into the show. And that was a pretty big deal for me.
Totally. No, I really am glad that you mentioned that idea of like singing along, like someone you don't know singing along to you. That's when you're like, what the hell just happened? Like, who are you? How did you find us? Like, you just want to like interview that person. Cause I know exactly what you're talking about. So cool.
Right.
In a world where everyone is confined to their homes, society begins its largest bin watch to date. In the hallowed library of Hulu, or perhaps on a shelf of DVDs you haven't looked at in a decade, is a show that perfectly encapsulates life in the early aughts and launched a friendship that would inspire millions. Hi, I'm Zach Braff.
And I'm Donald Faison.
In 2001, we starred in Scrubs, a sitcom that revealed a glimpse of what it was like to survive a medical internship. As Turk and JD, we explored guy love.
Nearly 20 years later, a lot has changed. We're not Supermen, but we're still best friends. Given the mandatory lockdown, there's no better time to relive the series that brought us together in the first place. And we're doing it with a podcast.
That's right, people. We're going to bring friends and crew members and fellow cast members and writers. And guess what? We're going to even invite some of you to call into the podcast and ask all the questions you want of the entire Sacred Heart staff.
Join us for Fake Doctors, Real Friends on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts.
And, kind of... not even on the flip side of that, but the idea, because, as you well know, and have seen many of your friends kind of go through this, hardcore is a very, fickle and transitional phase in many people's lives. And obviously their music tastes, are reflective of it. Bands usually have like a, 2 to 4 year length of being, a quote unquote allowed to be cool in hardcore or whatever. And obviously Ceremony was definitely, like you said, you had the, not even luxury, but you had the privilege to, kind of be lifted up to that status initially. Were you, and it seems like you guys were always kind of aware of that idea, because it was like, well, yeah, we don't want to be like completely swallowed up in this like, you know, hype machine or whatever the case may be.
Right.
And you had, I don't know, maybe this is me just reading way too much into it, but it was always kind of this like winking acknowledgement that you guys had, where it's just like, yeah, I understand. Like, you know, yeah, we're a hardcore band, obviously. And like, we always will be, but like, you know, we're not going to be just confined by that. Was that
right? Well,
yeah.
Yeah, obviously we are not, and we are not just, you know, we are a lot of things, and a lot of things have influenced our band, you know, and punk and hardcore is one of them. And we knew, our second record, Still Nothing Moves You, there's a lot on there that is not traditional hardcore or punk. And and that's how we've been able to stay a band and, you know, keep an interested audience is by not only being a hardcore band. Because the reality is, if there's no hardcore band whose best record is their sixth record, you know,
Yep.
that's just not how it goes, right? And it's not like that we were never conscious of that. We never said to ourselves, guys, we need to not just be this, or we need to quote unquote evolve, or we need to do this so we can have a lasting career. Like, that thought or conversation never happened. We were always just genuinely interested in doing other things, and we have always had there's always been a very diverse taste amongst the band, you know? So, you know, there are people in our band who, to tell you the truth, don't really like hardcore and have never really liked hardcore that much.
Right.
You know, they have the bands that they like, but it's never been a huge part of their life. And that's been that way since the very beginning of the band. And so I know I'm sort of veering off here, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, we've always, even when our music was more just straightforward traditional style hardcore, we never sort of viewed us as only that.
Totally. And I think that, you know, something, because I feel like, you know, anybody that like looks at Ceremony and, you know, just the idea of like the narrative of the constant reinvention of the band, like, you know, every single new record that comes out is obviously, you know, slightly different than the last one, or, you know, even drastically different. But like, everyone always is like, oh my gosh, dude, I can't even believe Ceremony, like, this is nuts. Like, you know, I'm just obviously exaggerating, but like,
yeah.
But it's like, there's so much like that. I mean, I personally, maybe just because I've paid attention to what you guys have done over the course of, you know, the tenure of your band, but like, you guys are still, in my mind, the same band. You're sonically different. And like, obviously, you know, you're
right.
made up of different components, but like, not only aesthetically, but then just the, you know, the attitude in which you approach these things. It's not like you've morphed into this like unrecognizable band where it's just like, oh yeah, like, you know, now they're all wearing tuxedos on stage or whatever, you know, it's like, I don't know.
Right. Yeah. But I feel like the precedent to what the band is now, was laid out very early on, you know, and if, you know, you are paying attention, then I feel like that's rather clear.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That it's like, yes, you can still, like, you know, we are still using, you know, we got drums, we got some guitars, like, you know, these are things that we have. Yeah. Like, you know, it's not like we've abandoned all this completely.
Right.
You know, and kind of on that tip, like, you know, you as a band and maybe you as a person as well, you guys have seemed to, been maybe not impervious, because I'm sure people's opinions on like how terrible your new record is, like, filters up to you or whatever. Like, of course I'm exaggerating, but like, people have expressed that for the last couple of records because they're not, you guys aren't the band that, whatever they grew up with or what have you. You guys just obviously like take that in stride and are just like, well, I'm sorry, but like, this is who we are. The
reality is that the people who say and feel that are the vast minority, and they get, their voices are the loudest, but their influence is very non-existent. And if you look at just the trajectory of our band, we've only have been able to play in front of more people and gain more opportunities and have been able to do more with the band as time has gone on. And that wouldn't be possible if the majority of our fan base, shared that sentiment that you just said. So I feel it's important for us because, like comments will get sent to us every now and again, and, of people, quote unquote, missing the old ceremony. But the reality is very short. So most people who were around when those first records came out have been long gone for over 10 years. And then all other people have gone on the ride with us because they too have grown and evolved. So it's like, if a literal handful of people are the ones, missing the old whatever, it really is just a handful. They're just the ones who feel the need to voice that publicly. Because again, the reality of the situation is that no one actually wants the old ceremony. It wouldn't, if we made that kind of style of music now, it would be pathetic. And I cannot think of one punk or hardcore band who 15 years after their inception was making the same kind of music as good as they were when they started. That's never been done before.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. Punk is a young person's, it comes from any art that's good is good because it's honest. And when you start doing something because you feel like you have to do it, or because that's what your audience wants, the art is going to suffer. Which is why a lot of bands who aren't in or with that style of music anymore are still making that style of music. Why it's not special anymore. Now there are bands who do that really well, but they're very few and far between. And that's why a lot of hardcore bands or punk bands only have 2 LPs. If there's a hardcore band that has 3 or 4 LPs, they're an anomaly.
Totally.
And a lot of times that 3rd and 4th LP is not very good unless you're Terror and you could continue to make great record after great record. But again, they're an exception to the rule.
Absolutely. No, totally. And kind of on that same tip, the idea that, do you like the sort of business aspect of the band? Because I know that you handle, a decent amount of it from either, working with labels and booking agents, that sort of stuff. Is that kind of just part and parcel, or is that, just something that you enjoy doing?
I care a lot about this band and care a lot about what happens to this band. Therefore, I just have a natural interest in making sure everything is running smoothly, and we don't want to pay a manager. So, Andy and I do most of that, but it's really just as simple as that. It doesn't feel like work to me because I'm doing something that I really care about. And between Andy and I, we could, between the two of us, having two of us, we are able to do all of that, all of the managerial aspects of being in a band. And, I don't feel comfortable being a band for 15 years and building a fan base and building, a large discography and all the things that come around with being a band for 15 years, and then just handing it over to someone else so they could profit off it. That doesn't feel right. That said, I mean, it's not like that we're opposed to the idea of managers. Really works for a lot of bands, and there's a scenario where it could work for us, but we've just never crossed the bridge where we felt like we needed one.
Yeah, totally. No, that makes sense. Yeah. It's like, some bands are able to operate in that world when you have, a member of the band that is willing to, kind of be engaged from that perspective. Cause some people, like, they just don't either have the patience or the time or the wherewithal. And, then it just kind of like, well, yeah, like no one in the band can handle it because everyone's terrible at it. So let's pass it along to somebody else or whatever. So,
right. Totally.
And so the band has also seemed to exist in this really interesting, place where you guys do a decent amount of touring and you're active and obviously are relatively prolific as far as putting out music and doing that sort of stuff, but then you all have like real lives, like you were alluding to earlier, with different members pursuing scholarly things, and then just people being involved in life beyond just the band. Do you think that is helpful for you guys from a sort of longevity perspective, or not saying that it's hindered the band because like, oh, we can't tour because someone's doing stupid school or whatever, but how is how's that been able to, I guess, be beneficial to the band?
Because we have so many other things going on in our lives, it means that we haven't had to solely rely on ceremony. Therefore, we haven't we've never had to tour 8 months out of the year and get burnt out on the material and each other and break up. It's also allowed us to take time away from each other and, come up with something for our next record that feels fresh. And having other things in our life, it may have been harder. We probably would have made the mistake earlier on to not change as much, because the reality is us changing as a band is what has been able to keep the band alive and keep our audience interested, no matter how many tens of people it disappoints. That has it's just objective truth that us evolving and changing, and maybe evolving is not the right word, but changing over time is what has allowed us to keep our audience interested. And it's very possible that if we were solely relying on this band for our livelihood, that we could have made the mistake earlier on to not shift as much, and then we would have created a disinterested audience.
Sure.
And that could have been the end of the band. I don't like to speak in hypotheticals or really in the past, but I think that us having other things has allowed us to continue to move forward artistically, which is what has allowed the band to continue.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about it in those terms of the idea that the pressure that bands feel like once the band becomes like a machine, and the livelihood and like managers and booking agents and your crew and all this stuff depends on you. You're much more reticent to make these stylistic shifts. Unless obviously everybody's on the same page and it's just like, okay, like we're willing to take this risk because we're going to be, bigger than, Muse or whatever. But
Right.
But yeah, that idea.
But you
of
never
just-
know that.
Totally. You never know.
You
that.
never know what you're going to do well, and to put any sort of emphasis on what the audience, what the audience wants, or you feel like they or what you feel like they want. That's when you've lost. Never have we written a song or gone in the direction because we thought that the audience would want that, or that's what they need. We write music that we write because we know that it's good. And then obviously we do want people to like it. It's not like that we're trying to say we don't care what anyone thinks, but when we're creating, the audience is not a variable at all. And I think that allows us to make sincere art, and the audience can tell when something is a lie or when something is honest.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. The last thing I want to hit on was the fact that you're an adult, like you're married, like you're by all stretches of the term, an adult.
I have 2 cats.
Yeah, exactly. Their life is existing for you in ways that it wasn't existing for you as a 16-year-old. But clearly you're still engaged with not only music and obviously participating in the creative arts, but then still edge, still vegan from what I can gather. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so that's not common. I guess what kind of keeps you beyond just the fact that obviously this is you as an individual, I guess what keeps you kind of engaged and caring from that perspective?
Well, I've always attributed my life. It's like sexuality. A lot of people who say they're straight edge or say they're vegan or are involved in any sort of subversive lifestyle are tourists, and they're kind of just trying it out. And they're seeing if it works for them, or they're doing it because their friends are doing it, or they're just killing time, where it never felt that way for me. I always felt a genuine connection to all of those things that you just mentioned. And I know it's such a cliche thing to say, but I never felt like just a pedestrian person. That's never been me and been my way. So when I say I attribute to sexuality, it's like I've never had a choice in who or what I'm attracted to. That's just who I am. And I truly do feel that, I never had the urge to sip alcohol once in my life. I always thought it was fucking stupid. I never understood why anyone would want to pay money to consume something that is objectively poisonous and harms you and harms the people around you. I thought I had that conscious thought as a young person. I didn't get into straight edge thinking that maybe I would, I kind of understand this, and maybe hopefully I'll keep feeling this way. To me, it was always just a clear decision. Not harming innocent creatures so I could feel full, again, seems just like an obvious decision to make. It's not really even a decision. It's just how I feel. Much like how I think anyone feels regarding their sexuality. It's not a choice that you make. And that's how I feel about any sort of lifestyle decisions that I make. Obviously, I have interests, and there are things that I do have tastes that have developed over time, and my certain tastes have evolved, just like with anyone. But there are certain things, and I think any true creative or true artist or subversive person would agree that it's not a choice that you make. It's just something that is like instinct.
Yeah, it's like it's baked into you. Like this is right. It's like I love the word tourist or pedestrian because it just describes a lot of the way that, music is a very transactional relationship for people, whether it's just like,
Right.
I'm just going to turn on the radio or whatever. And like, yeah, music is on or whatever. But like, when people like you and I and many of our friends dive into it and, get absorbed by it, that is a different relationship than this is simply just being a form of entertainment. Even though it is entertaining, it's a whole different thing.
Of course. And there are genres of music that I am that way towards. I have a very broad taste and appreciation for music, and some of those I treat as junk food. A cupcake isn't meant to provide you nutritional value, but it tastes good, and you eat it and you move on. And then there's something like Kraftwerk or Fugazi or whatever, that have a more substantial effect on your being.
Totally. Yeah. It's like this, this is not only enriching for the soul, enriching for the mind and blah, 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 but yeah. I totally understand what you're saying. Well, Anthony, thank you so much for hanging out, dude. Honestly, this was really enjoyable for me.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was
Thank
great.
you. Yeah.
Okay. How was that chat, right? I just feel thankful that I can have these discussions with people, have them be super engaged and, willing to go in a lot of different places and be reflective. Like anytime I ask, sometimes very convoluted questions, when a person takes a beat and is like, like when they think about it, it's just really, really compelling. And I love that engagement. And I hope that you get that engagement and you feel that sort of connectivity as you're listening to these chats, because that's what I strive to get, is just that real kind of like, that's not like, oh, wow, you've asked a really thoughtful question, but like, I haven't considered it that way. I just love those moments. It makes me so happy. So anyways, next week we have a really interesting conversation that actually got brought up via the episode that I did a couple weeks ago with Scott Krause from Earth Crisis, where we walked through each of their full-length records, which, still to this day, I mean, even though it's only been a couple weeks, but it's probably one of my favorite episodes that I've ever done on this podcast. So if you haven't listened to it, dive back. But next week is Shane Durgee, who is the vocalist for Framework, and which was pre-Earth Crisis, which technically was like an early formation of Earth Crisis, because they were kind of one and the same band when that thing was all starting. So Framework, if you haven't listened to them, incredible. Like I remember in my early hardcore days when I discovered Earth Crisis and then had to know as much as humanly possible about them, I discovered Framework and was like, wow, this is just as good. It's like a little bit more metallic, but like really, really good. But anyways, Shane was the vocalist for that band. And it was funny because it just, a friend of mine connected me and I was like, wow, I'm talking to the vocalist of Framework. And he was totally down to talk about the early days of the formation of the Syracuse scene, as it were. So Shane is on next week, and for those of the old heads, you will be very excited about that conversation. And even the younger heads who are just like, yeah, I like Earth Crisis. Done. So that's what we got next week. And until then, please be safe, everybody. Special shout out to Sonos. They're the best speaker system I have ever witnessed in my entire life. I cannot tell you how much your music listening experience will change once you get your first Sonos system, set it up. Within 5 minutes, you are up and running, connected to your Wi-Fi network. It's beautiful. It is seamless, and it sounds unbelievable. Thank you very much, Sonos. Visit Sonos.com to learn more.
You've been listening to the Jabberjaw Podcast Network, jabberjawmedia.com. Shh.
Hey, Miles.
Yes.
It's Jack from work.
Yes, hi.
Did you know that we host a daily news and culture podcast where people can go to get caught up on what is happening?
Are you confused about that? You're talking about the Daily
I
Zeitgeist,
just
the show
wanted to
that we
make
do
sure
every day.
you knew and that everybody knew that you could listen to us every day, twice a day, talk about what is happening, and they could learn everything without feeling the life drained from their soul.
Yeah, I think at the Daily Zeitgeist, we like to give people a balance of just enough news that they feel informed and just enough laughs that they're not overwhelmed and can have a decent day after listening.
So guys, listen to the Daily Zeitgeist on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever fine podcasts are given away for free.